Fears of a brewing global recession were renewed this week as markets whipsawed over President Donald Trump's trade war with China as well as disappointing economic data from both Germany and China. The U.S. economy, for now, remains on solid ground with strong consumer spending propping up the country's longest expansion, now in its 11th year, despite weak business investment and a slowdown in manufacturing. Since Trump took office, paychecks have grown, the stock market has reached record highs and unemployment has stayed at a historic 50-year low. But like the adage goes, economic expansions don't die of old age. Something has to happen to spook businesses, consumers and investors. It's hard to predict exactly if, or when, a recession could hit the United States. But the trigger could be a number of factors: Trump's trade policy, a weakening global economy, the waning effects of the 2017 tax cuts, or even a calamitous risk of deflation. Here's a look at the top 5 risks that could set off a U.S. downturn. 1. A pullback in consumer spending. With business investment slowing, consumers are powering the U.S. economy. The money Americans spend each day on coffees, cars and clothing helps to account for about 2/3 of economic growth. And the fact that Americans haven't shied away from spending at a solid clip this year despite a turbulent trade war with China has helped to balance out weaknesses in other pockets of the economy. Retail sales economic data that captures spending at stores, restaurants and online popped in July, according to the Commerce Department on Thursday, the strongest reading since March in part due to Amazon's Prime Day and other retailer promotions. Walmart, a bellwether of U.S. consumer spending, also reported strong sales at its jumbo-sized stores and upped its forecast for the rest of the year. But worries about a future downturn can also have the effect of becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy. As consumers start to worry about the possibility of a worsening economy, it's usually followed by a desire to quit spending as much and delay bigger purchases. 2. An escalation with China. Trump's on-again, off-again trade war with China has left U.S. importers as well as farmers hit by Beijing's retaliatory tariffs unsure about what comes next. That has already slowed investment decisions by U.S. businesses, and will likely continue for some time. In an effort to avoid harming the holiday shopping season, the Trump administration agreed this week to throttle back on plans to impose 10% tariffs on $300 billion of Chinese goods that were set to go into effect on September 1st. But men's and women's clothing items, some electronics and sporting goods from China will all still be hit by a 10% levy starting in about 2 weeks. Beijing threatened to take retaliatory action this week, despite the pullback on most of the tariffs facing Chinese-made cell phones and toys. China would have no choice to take necessary countermeasures, according to a statement from the country's State Council's Customs Tariff Commission. Goldman Sachs and other analysts no longer expect the Trump administration to reach a trade deal with China ahead of the 2020 election, and anticipate far deeper economic effects due to the trade war. 3. A global slowdown. 5 of the world's biggest economies are now at risk of a recession, and the spillover effect could eventually drag the U.S. economy down. 2. Germany, the world's 5th largest economy, reported that its economy shrank in the second quarter, opening up the possibility that it might dip into a full-blown recession. It was joined by the United Kingdom, whose economy also contracted for the first since 2012. The International Monetary Fund last month cut its forecast for global growth this year to 3.2%, the weakest rate of expansion since 2009. It also downgraded its expectations for 2020 to 3.5%. The fund has warned that growth in 2020 would be slashed by 0.5 percentage point if the trade dispute escalates further. In response, central banks around the world have been trimming interest rates this year to head off a global economic slowdown. Last week, 3 central banks, India, New Zealand and Thailand, all aggressively cut rates more than expected over trade fears and growing economic uncertainty. 4. Too little inflation. Inflation has been remained historically low both in the United States and around the world. It's one of the reasons that Federal Reserve Jerome Powell has cited for cutting rates for the first time since the 2008 financial crisis. Central bankers consider low inflation dangerous because it tends to weigh on interest rates, giving them less room to juice the economy during a recession. That's what happened in Japan, which has struggled for years to kickstart growth. We don't want to get on that road, Powell warned lawmakers in July. The latest report this week showed U.S. inflation ticking slightly upward, providing some comfort to policymakers worried about deflation. But a slowdown abroad could push energy prices lower, making it harder for policymakers to keep the U.S. economy on the steady 2% inflation track, a sign of a healthy economy. 5. The big unknown, Brexit. The decision by Britain's new Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, to abandon efforts to negotiate a soft Brexit with the European Union has created additional global economic uncertainty. Johnson has pledged that the UK would leave the European Union on October 31st with or without a deal, raising concerns about shortages of food and medicine. While the British economy is expected to rebound in the third quarter bypassing a recession, the decision to pull out of the EU without a deal might trigger a downturn that would further accelerate a global slowdown.
China's worldwide influence is at an all-time high as the US has abandoned allies. Putin is interfering in our elections as well as Brexit and many other EU politics, and Putin is fighting for our enemy in Syria. If this is containment, then we are in big trouble. The GDP dropping every quarter. This coming quarter is projected to be under 2%. He has never had an annual GDP over 3%. Over 85% of the tax cut benefits went to the upper 1%. Middle class cuts to expire soon, corporations' tax cuts to be permanent. Any middle class saving being negated by higher prices due to his moronic tariffs. ICE is still going strong. They just relocated. In fact, they are spreading through Africa. Hasn't signed a single meaningful trade deal in 2.5 years. Russia and China still gaining influence throughout the world. Both are making inroads into South America and especially Africa. Iran now increasing enrichment of uranium and can resume research toward the bomb with no oversight because of his incompetence. Russia is still coming after us. Immigration is worse than ever. And we have a US white nationalist terrorist in our own backyard. We had to give the farmers a $28 billion socialist check. We are still paying for these tariffs and Trump military parade and the $102 million in Gulf trips. But wait, the greatest achievement of Trump is probably the debt, yes, the debt. Instead of making America great again, he made America's debt greater again. Candidate Trump promised he would eliminate the nation's debt in 8 years. Instead, his budgets would add $9.1 trillion during that time. It would increase the U.S. debt to $29 trillion according to Trump's budget estimates. Any president must cut into the biggest programs to make an impact on the debt. More than 2/3 of government spending goes to mandatory obligations made by previous acts of Congress. For fiscal year 2020, Social Security benefits cost $1 trillion a year, Medicare costs $679 billion, and Medicaid costs $418 billion. The interest on the debt is $479 billion. To lower the debt, military spending must also be cut. The most Obama spent was $855 billion in fiscal year 2011. The most Bush spent was $666 billion in fiscal year 2008. Instead of cutting, Trump is breaking all those records. Military spending rose to $989 billion in fiscal year 2020. Trump thinks about the national debt as he does personal debt. A 2016 Fortune magazine analysis revealed Trump's business is $1.11 billion in debt. That includes $846 million owed on 5 properties. But the income generated by these properties easily pays their annual interest payment. In the business world, Trump's debt is reasonable. But sovereign debt is different. The World Bank compares countries based on their total debt to gross domestic product ratio. It considers a country to be in trouble if that ratio is greater than 77%. The US ratio is 104%. That's the $21.516 trillion US debt as of September 28, 2018, divided by the $20.658 trillion nominal GDP. At first, it seemed Trump was lowering the debt. It fell $102 billion in the first 6 months after Trump took office. On January 20, the day Trump was inaugurated, the debt was $19.9 trillion. On July 30, it was $19.8 trillion. But it was not because of anything he did. Instead, it was because of the federal debt ceiling. On September 8, 2017, Trump signed a bill increasing the debt ceiling. Later that day, the debt exceeded $20 trillion for the first time in U.S. history. On February 9, 2018, Trump signed a bill suspending the debt ceiling until March 1, 2019. It was $22 trillion. In just 2 years, Trump has overseen the fastest dollar increase in the debt of any president. Trump's fiscal year 2020 budget projects the debt would increase $5 trillion during his first term. That's as much as Obama added while fighting a recession. Trump has not fulfilled his campaign promise to cut the debt. Instead, he's done the opposite. The $22 trillion figure makes the $21 trillion missing from the Department of Housing and Urban Development and the Department of Defense seem less significant. Piling more debt to younger generations for years to come. Trump is indeed making America's debt great again. Everything has been increasing steadily since the 2008 crash. Trump is just in it for the ride, just like Obama was. We are just building up to an even greater crash than 2008. When the next crash is planned, we stand to lose much more than in 2008 since the deficit has more than doubled from about $10.5 trillion to about $22 trillion since then. The plan is probably to skyrocket everything to build up to an astronomical collapse, making even 1929 look like child's play. And why would they do it, would you say? Well, in order to introduce a one-world currency, a one-world economy and a one-world government and perhaps a one-world octopus like World Central Bank. Of course, this is currently just a conspiracy theory. But it seems like our politicians, both Republican and Democrats, are being encouraged to keep spending more and more. The higher it goes, the more impact it will have when it all comes crashing down. This was the Atlantis Report. Please like, share, subscribe, and share with us your opinion in the comment section below. Thank you.